Hey everyone, so this is going to be an in-depth breakdown of Duo Master Crota because this encounter is, well, it's quite different from how the normal duo is done. Normal duo is generally Hunter Warlock from what I've seen so far. This is very different from that, and I wanted to give a little walkthrough of this because my duo, Titanskate, and I have spent a ton of time in this encounter, probably nearing 100 hours at this point. There are a lot of little nuances, and I wanted to break them all down to save anyone running this the time of having to figure them out for themselves. Because you only have a week at a time to run this, and that gets a little rough, especially if you have to figure all this out. So I hope this is helpful to the two other people out there that are insane enough to be running Duo Master Crota in this season. One quick side note, please excuse my sloppy editing. This is actually my first attempt at editing a video because I want to learn, so it'll probably be a little rough around the edges, but I'm doing my best. I think that's all I have to say for now, so let's get to the actual breakdown. Let's cover real quick some assumptions I'm going to make, and then also a myth about this encounter. So my assumptions are that you know the raid mechanics, and then I will also assume that you have cleared Duo Normal Crota, or you at least have some experience with Duo Normal Crota. Knowing the running rotation is just going to save you time when learning this because most of the learning has to go into learning DPS. The one myth that I want to talk about is that everyone thinks that Final Stand is the hardest part of this lowman. Mathematically, it's actually not. So here are the numbers real quick. Final Stand is 25% of Crota's health, and we have 3 phases to get to Final Stand, which means we need to deal 25% of his health in each damage phase. In first and second phase, we have about 22 seconds, and in third phase, we have 30 seconds. We have less time in first and second phase because we have to leave early for Oversoul. In third phase, we have the Final Stand animation to switch the Chalice for Oversoul. Final Stand is 30 seconds long, so mathematically it's the same difficulty as third damage phase. Both are easier than first and second damage phase. The only reason I think people think this is difficult is because of the nerves in Final Stand, and I get that, obviously, but with practice, Final Stand is actually definitely the easiest part, and most of your runs will end due to not having enough damage on first and second phase because they are the hardest damage checks of this encounter. Okay, let's talk about the roles and loadouts for this lowman. This has only been cleared on Double Titan so far. Hunter Titan is possible, and the damage is actually more forgiving, but prep for it's a lot harder, so I still think Double Titan is better. There are 2 roles for this encounter. One player will be on Navigator, and the other will be on Tractor for the entire time. If you are going to try the Hunter Titan setup, then Titan is always the Navigator role, and Hunter is always on Tractor. Real quick before covering loadouts, the main artifact mods you'll need are Unstoppable Sidearm, Galvanic Armor, and Shield Crush. Galvanic Armor is only for if you're on Hunter. Anything else is just bonus, really, so those are the main ones, but then run whatever else you want. Let's go over Hunter loadouts in case you want to run Hunter. First of all, infuse your gear. Unlike me, I just got this cloak, so hadn't been running on Hunter yet, so all my gear is 1900. And also preferably have 100 resil. I only have 80 because my Crota armor is really bad. First up, you have your running loadout, which has a rocket sidearm to stun champs, and then your DPS loadout switches to a blinding GL to blind thrall for chalice swap. Both loadouts need to be on Crota armor because you are doing both swords. Other than that, DPS loadout just has mainly stuff to get your grenade back and then also stuff for your kinetic weapon handling. Now let's move on to Titan loadouts. Tractor cannon player, you have 2 loadouts. You have a running loadout and a damage loadout. Really, the only thing that switches between here, or main thing, is your kinetic weapon. You go from rocket sidearm to stun unstops to a blinding GL to blind thrall during swap phase. Okay, Navigator player, you have 3 loadouts. This is actually different from last season due to the grapple point changes where it gets diminishing returns for grappling to a point multiple times. This means you will have to put up a new grapple point going into Final Stand, and that complicates the Final Stand setup a little bit compared to last season, which it was pretty much the same as a normal damage phase. So we'll talk about that in a sec. But let's cover your loadouts real quick. You have a running loadout, standard, and a damage loadout, which really just has stuff on to get your grenade back if you miss your grapple, although missing your grapple is kind of a death sentence, but it's here just in case you can get it back. And then you have your Lion Rampant loadout to put up the third damage phase grapple point without touching the ground, because third damage phase is shorter than 30 seconds, so if we get Gordian Knot cooldown, it is just over. We need to not get Gordian Knot cooldown in third phase, so this is very important. Other than that, both players should have 4 copies of the raid mod, uh, Stoic when panicked. This will decrease the damage you take, or give you damage resistance rather, when you're holding a sword, which is important when you're going for first and second sword on Crota. It's not mandatory, but he does hit incredibly hard, so I would recommend having as many copies of this mod as possible, because it does help, although he still does a ton of damage. Before we get to the encounter, I quickly want to talk about the Hunter Titan class comp. Duo Master Crota hasn't been cleared with this setup yet because I didn't have a Syntho Cloak last Master Crota week, but it is very possible and likely easier than Double Titan, specifically this season because of the artifact mods. I don't know how future seasons will look, but I hope this all still holds true. I'm going to put the main differences between Hunter Titan and Double Titan in this section, so use this as a reference if you plan on running Hunter Titan. The first problem you'll run into with Hunter Titan is First Sword. Hunter does not have Banner of War, and it also can't give Woven Mail when exploding a Tangle. So to make First Sword work, the Hunter has to do First Sword so the Titan can give Woven and proc Banner. This means that Hunter is doing both First and Second Sword, so the running rotation before and after First Sword is exactly the same, except the Hunter player will pick up Chalice both times. Your mechanics phase also has to be faster because you have to wait out a longer drained of light timer at the end of First Sword. This is probably 20 to 30 extra seconds. The main upside to Hunter Titan is damage. Damage with Hunter Titan should be significantly more forgiving because Hunter can proc Radiant on a melee, which will give the full 25% damage increase from Shield Crush to the Grapple melee. Grapple melee requires 2 buffs to get the full 25% damage increase. The Double Titan strat only has Woven Mail, but Hunter Titan has Woven Mail and Radiant to get the full increase on the Grapple melee. Hunter also has Ascension to give Amplified, which will give 30% DR with Galvanic Armor this season for better survivability during DPS. This also jolts, which is a small amount of extra damage, but we'll take any extra damage that we can get. If you want to get really crazy, this is a strat that I've been cooking up. I'm not sure if it will work, but I'm going to throw it here anyway in case people want to try it. Then you can throw a Silence and Squall underneath the opposite bridge at the start of damage phase. This should track to the Thrall under your bridge near the end of the damage phase, and hopefully it will proc a Stylish Grapple melee. Getting off even one Stylish Grapple melee would make this duo just completely free, and getting off more than one would likely make two-phase doable even without Strand Surge. The hardest part about running Hunter Titan is the final stand setup because the Titan player now has to do all the work. After placing the grapple point for final stand, get a tangle and extend banner like a normal damage phase, then grapple back up to Crota. Hunter will take Chalice from you and just grapple back up as soon as Crota becomes damageable because they don't have anything else they have to do. I don't think it's too realistic to do a stylish grapple during Final Stand, although feel free to try it, but the extra damage from Shield Crush times 2 and the survivability from Amplified should be more than enough for you to clear Final Stand. That's it for loadouts and the Hunter Titan setup. Now let's start the encounter and get to the first running / mechanics phase. Okay, we got loadouts out of the way, so let's start the encounter. When the encounter begins, you should super to kill ads in the hallways at the beginning. You will always get this back before damage starts in case you need to panic pop, but in an ideal scenario, you won't do that, so it's totally fine to use your super here in the hallway. In our runs, Tractor always goes left and Navigator always goes right, but this doesn't matter at all, it's just the sides that we chose to run down, and we have stuck with that ever since. After killing all the adds in the hallway, go to your respective towers and kill all the knights inside the towers to spawn unstops. This is the point where you will restart the cycle after dealing a damage phase. Navigator player, shoot a grapple point in the center of the arena, pretty much exactly above where the chalice initially spawns. Meanwhile, Tractor, you will stun unstops, starting with your teammates' unstop and followed by your own. It's pretty important that you stun your teammates' unstop first, just so you can shoot it again in case it doesn't stun the first time. You have way more capability to react to an unstop fake stunning because you're the one with unstop. So if your unstop fake stuns, you can just shoot it again or pop super really quickly. Your teammate will likely not be prepared for this, so make sure their unstop stuns first. Kill the unstops however you want. 1-2 punch plus frenzied blade with syntheseps and banner of war will get them perfectly finishable, so you can do special finishers on them. If you want to just outright kill them, then do a grapple melee using the grapple point. After champs are dead, Navigator pick up the chalice and hunt down the first two wizards. They can sometimes run off to the sides of the arena, up the stairs, or even into spawn, or they'll just be in middle. It's really random, so just go find them and kill them so that more wizards keep spawning. Now's the chill and pretty fun part. You're pretty much just spamming grapple melees back and forth, killing wizards and adds and making special finis as needed. When Chalice is around 80% full, you'll kill the Sword Bearer and then go to the Chalice swap spot to swap Chalice. Ideally, you will have Woven Mail while you're switching Chalice, just in case Crota decides to completely destroy your health bar. To ensure you have Woven Mail every single time, then either pick up a Tangle and throw it before switching Chalice, or Navigator player, you can shoot your teammate with Navigator while you're switching and it will give both of you Woven Mail for 10 seconds. After switching, Tractor, go put the chalice away, then determine the side for first sword, and kill any rogue wizards that are still in the arena. They will stop spawning after Swordbearer is killed, and we do not want any of these coming up on us during first sword. However, if they do run up on you, then try to kill them while staying in range of your teammate so they still get banner, and you should be fine. Make sure to kill the rogue wizards without a frenzied blade. We don't want to spawn a tangle because this will mess up our tangle timer for first sword and will make us have to wait an extra 12 seconds to create a new tangle, which just wastes time. It's not a big deal if you spawn a tangle here, but again, just a waste of time. Navigator, you can kill any rogue wizards as well before picking up the sword, but they have to be close by because the sword's despawn timer is decently short. There's a pretty good amount of forgiveness, so I'll let you be the judge of if you think you can kill any wizards. But if there are any close by, just kill them real quick, and if not, let your teammate deal with them and just pick up the sword. Let's real quick talk about some of the issues that can happen during the running phase. I'm going to address all the issues for both running before and after first sword here because it's pretty much the same. So just assume that everything that can happen here will also happen for after first sword. The first issue that can come up is adds jumping in front of you while you're grappling and body blocking your grapple. If you see this is about to happen, then you can cancel your grapple really quickly to keep 50% of it. If not, and it eats your whole grapple, it's not a big deal. Just place down a barricade to proc bomber to get some energy back and keep killing wizards with normal shotgun melees and you'll be fine. Another issue that can happen is unstops not stunning. Make sure to stun your teammates unstop first because you are able to react quicker to an unstunned unstop. If your teammate's unstop doesn't stun, then they will probably just pop super to kill it. If a champ fake stuns and you don't have super for it, just run away and wait for a restun, and then just kill it and you'll be fine. Another thing that can happen is Crota completely destroying your health bar while switching Chalice. I already talked about this a little bit. Navigator, just shoot your teammate with Navigator, obviously, to give both of you Woven Mail, and if you have Banner as well, you will be fine. That's it for running before first sword. It's pretty straightforward, not a lot to do. Now let's move on to first sword. Okay, it's time for first sword. Tractor player, after putting away the chalice, go to the tower that Crota is closest to, and you'll kill the knights with a charged melee to spawn a tangle and reproc your banner if it ran out, or extend it if you have banner still. If your banner timer is really low, then you should definitely wait to kill one of the knights to reproc a new banner. Navigator player, you will follow the tractor player to this tower and kind of just exist until you guys are both ready to do first sword. When you're both ready, you'll jump onto the bridge with Crota, throw the tangle for woven mail, tractor Crota, and then do the sword combo. The master sword combo is different from normal mode because for some reason aerial heavy attacks do more damage than ground attacks. So the combo for master is aerial heavy, super heavy, jump, and then another aerial heavy. While Nav is doing the sword combo, tractor should be standing behind them so they are between the tractor player and Crota. This is important in case Crota decides to target the tractor player, so he still lunges in a direction that the sword will be able to hit. Another thing that's important to add is if it's really obvious that Crota is going to swing in a direction that the sword player will not be able to hit with another aerial heavy, because aerial heavies don't have any tracking on them, they should perform a ground heavy as the last attack instead of an aerial heavy, and this will still be breakable really easily by second sword. It just requires one extra attack, so it's not that big of a deal. The most important thing is that you still get enough damage off for second sword to break instantly, and one extra ground heavy instead of an aerial heavy is still enough to do so. After finishing first sword, just get the hell away from Crota because he does a billion damage and it's really, really painful. So there are a few things that can go wrong while doing first sword. The main thing you'll run into is Crota is not in a good spot to do sword. You want him to be on the bridge because it's flat and has the lowest chance for the super to no-reg. If he's standing under the oversoul, which that ground is kind of slanted and the super can definitely no-reg up there, which is really bad. It's just a rerun if that happens. Then go wait behind the pillar and he will move to bridge pretty much every single time, although sometimes he'll take longer than others, and then do the first sword like normal. If he takes a while to move to that spot, then your banner could run out, and if this happens, the tractor player should go down to middle and get a new tangle and reproc banner, while Navigator holds Crota's attention and keeps him in the same spot. Then just go for first sword like normal. These are the main issues that you'll run into most of the time. There are a few other little things that can happen that I'll address real quick. The first one is that the sword can just run out early. This happens on higher frames, so you generally want the person with lower FPS to be your navigator player because they're always doing first sword. Other than that, it's just learning the sword timing, and that's fairly tight, so it just comes with practice. The second issue is Crota can just pinch you into a wall and physics you across the map, or get you to 1 HP, or straight up launch you off the map, which are all not great. This will pretty much only happen to the person doing sword, aka navigator player. This almost never happens to tractor, or at least I've never seen it happen to tractor player. If this messes up the sword combo and you don't get all the hits off that you need, then you should just restart the run. It's not worth trying. But if he physicses you after first sword combo is complete and it was done perfectly, then even if you die, it doesn't matter. You can just get the res and keep going. That's it for first sword. It's pretty straightforward. Let's move on to running after first sword. Mechanics after first sword are very similar to before first sword, so I imagine this section will be really short. First things first, Navigator, you should put up a new grapple point in middle, just so it's there for killing wizards and unstops. You can also put it up after unstops if you want to, but I prefer to have it up before unstops, just because it's useful for killing them easily. Tractor player, make a tangle on adds in mid and grapple to the other tower to kill the knights to spawn unstops, and then get ready to stun them. Make sure, again, to stun your teammates unstop first, and then your own, and then just kill both of them. Alternatively, Navigator can also go kill the knights if they want. It doesn't really matter who kills the other knights, as long as one of you does it. This time, Tractor player, you will pick up the chalice because you are doing second sword. So go and pick up the chalice, and then continue killing wizards and adds in middle with your grapple melees, and make special finishers as needed. Rocket Sidearm should get the wizard to a perfectly finishable level in 2 or 3 shots. I don't remember, it's one of the two, but you can get them perfectly finishable with Rocket Sidearm, which is very convenient. And then again, kill the Sword Bearer when the Chalice is about 80% charged. Go to the Chalice swap location and switch the Chalice. Make sure you have Woven Mail for this in case Crota beams you again. This time Navigator, you will go put the Chalice away and kill any rogue wizards in middle. Tractor player, go pick up the sword. You can also kill any rogue wizards that are close by before picking up the sword, but again, just make sure you pick up the sword before it despawns. So if the wizards are far away, don't go for them, let your teammate deal with them, and you will be fine. That is it for running. You are ready to set up DPS. DPS setup is fairly easy and there aren't many issues here. Both players have very different jobs for setup, so let's start with Tractor. After picking up the second sword, locate the Chalice swap location. You'll do DPS on the same side as the Chalice swap location. If the swap is in middle, then you can pick whichever side you prefer. Doesn't really matter because you'll have plenty of time to move Crota to that side. You can tell your teammate which side you're going to do DPS on. I normally do, although they can look for themselves, so it doesn't really matter, but I still think it's a good idea. After you locate the spot, go hide under the bridge on that side and switch to your damage loadout. Then go grab any ammo needed and go behind the pillar that we wait behind to start damage. While your teammate is doing their job, you will periodically peek out from behind this pillar and jump to keep Crota's aggro. You don't want his aggro to be on your teammate because he will run over to spawn, and that is very, very bad. Other than that, you will just wait behind this pillar and keep peeking until your teammate calls to start DPS, and then you will go for second sword. Don't worry if you see the Oversoul looms, or whatever it says, I don't exactly remember, text prompt in chat. You have about 30 seconds after this prompt appears before the Oversoul wipe triggers, so you have plenty of time even after seeing this message. Okay, Navigator, you have a lot of stuff to do for DPS setup. First and foremost, figure out which side you're dealing damage on. You can get the call from your teammate or just look for yourself, doesn't matter. Then kill any stray wizards that are wandering around. You do not want these to run up on you during DPS because they hit insanely hard, and it's pretty much just a wipe if there's a wizard left alive. After you ensure all the wizards are dead, go kill both the knights in the tower on the same side that you will deal damage on, and then go kill only one of the knights in the opposite tower. So if you're dealing damage on right side, you will kill both knights in right tower and only one of them in left tower. If you kill both in left tower, so they're all dead, then it'll spawn unstops and start spawning wizards again, and it'll spawn the sword bearer, and it's just a mess overall, so be sure you leave one knight alive in the opposite tower. After you kill the knights, go hide behind the same pillar with your teammate. This is to ensure that Crota will move into a good spot for damage because most of the time he is aggroed on you while you are running around killing knights. Once your Drained of Light debuff is almost out, you can eager to the Chalice storage and get ready to put up the grapple point for DPS. Once your timer's out, you will put up the grapple point for DPS. Here's the lineup on screen now, and then you'll switch to your fusion rifle for the Oversoul. The next few things will happen in really quick succession, so just get ready. Tell your teammate to be ready so they're prepared to do sword. Switch to your DPS loadout and pick up Chalice. Use a charged melee on a thrall to spawn a tangle and proc banner. Then tell your teammate to go, implying that they should go for second sword now, and shoot 2 more thrall with your shotgun to extend banner to its max duration. Next, you will pick up the tangle and grapple up to DPS. This is the end of your setup, and I will explain grappling to the tangle in more detail in the DPS section. Now let's talk about the things that can go wrong in DPS setup. For Tractor player, Crota can sometimes retarget onto the Navigator player and run into spawn to try to shoot them while they're at the Chalice storage. This isn't really common, and if you jump and peek him periodically to maintain his aggro, this should ideally never happen. Crota can also teleport, which is pretty annoying, but it's pretty obvious when he's about to do this because he usually goes AFK for about 5 seconds before he does it. Most of the time, when he comes out of his teleport animation, he will be in the exact same spot that he started in, so he barely ever moves. The only time he'll actually move is if he aggroes on the Chalice player in the middle of his teleport animation, and this is just insanely unlucky. He will teleport into spawn if this happens because he's trying to get the player with the chalice. If your running rotation was fairly quick, then you should have plenty of time before the Oversoul kills you to move Crota back to a good spot, so this shouldn't actually be that big of an issue, it's just annoying. Another thing that can happen during DPS setup for Tractor player is Crota runs way too close to spawn and sorta can shoot you around the pillar from spawn side. If this happens, you should leave the pillar and go up to the tower on damage side, and he will move back towards you to the top of the bridge. Then you can run back behind the pillar, and he should be in a much better spot. This works almost every single time, but if it doesn't work, just give it some time and he should eventually move. Okay, Navigator player, if you choose to melee a Cursed Thrall when there are other Cursed Thrall nearby, you will just straight up die, so make sure you choose your Thrall wisely. You also want to be incredibly careful to not blow up the Thrall economy because we need those for Synthos, and if there are not enough ads for Synthos, it is just a wipe. You will not have enough damage, period. Also, on very rare occasion, the grapple point can just vanish after you put it up. There's absolutely nothing you can do about this. It's just random RNG, and it's not common, but it can happen. And this is just a massive ratio, and it's a wipe. Let's briefly talk about third phase DPS setup because there are a few minor but important changes that affect the setup for the Navigator player. After moving to the Chalice Depot, switch to your Lion Rampant's loadout and place the third grapple point while airborne. Specifically, the grapple point needs to be fired while airborne, and you have to switch off Navigator while still airborne. You'll have to wait a second after firing the grapple point before switching off Navigator, otherwise the grapple point will disappear immediately because it didn't have enough time to spawn in. If done correctly, you will not receive the Gordian Knot cooldown of 30 seconds, and you'll be able to place the grapple point for final stand. Switch to your DPS loadout, but importantly not Fusion Rifle yet, because we will be doing that during final stand setup. Make sure to delay the start of damage phase until the Chalice has slightly charged if you think you will push to final before Chalice fills up. We want Chalice to fill up ideally at exactly the same time that we push Crota to final stand. If you do not delay when you should have, then you will have to wait for Chalice to fill up before pushing to final stand, which means that you will have to stand there and tank Crota's attacks, which is absolutely terrifying. So just make sure you delay if you have to. If you delayed too long, then Chalice will expire before you're able to make the swap, and Navigator player will die. This is mostly a feel thing, and you'll learn how much you have to delay with practice. Navigator will choose how long they want to delay and give the go call whenever they feel comfortable. When the go call is made, Tractor player, you will go for second sword. Second sword is very easy, and there's almost nothing that can go wrong here. When you are both ready to start DPS, come out from hiding behind the pillar, refresh the grapple point, and just run at Crota, taking a similar path to what's shown on screen. If first sword was executed correctly, then you'll only need one aerial heavy followed by a super immediately to break the shield. If first sword did a ground heavy as its last attack instead of an aerial, then an additional light attack will need to be done before the aerial heavy. This doesn't add any additional time, so it doesn't really matter. The shield will still break instantly when the combo is done. The only thing that can go wrong here is Crota backpedals and shoots you while you're running towards him. He can sometimes even kill you if he hits every single shot, but this is incredibly rare and will barely ever happen if DPS setup is done properly. He can also backpedal while you're attacking him, which is really unlucky, and that means you'll have to do an extra ground heavy. That's it, you have now entered damage phase. Let's finally address the elephant in the room, which is DPS. DPS is done using Syntho grapple melees performed at max speed for basically the entire damage phase. Since damage is so important, I'm going to take a minute to explain how to do max speed grapple melee DPS before I even get to addressing Crota. Max speed grapple melees are performed by holding the S key during the entire damage phase. This is sort of contrary to what most people do because it feels way more natural to hold the W key during grapple melee DPS because the enemy you're trying to hit is in front of you, not behind you. Grapple melee doesn't actually care which directional input you use as long as you are on the ground. while you are grappling. That is very important. Your feet have to be grounded, and no matter which directional input you use, the grapple melee will proc immediately upon grappling to the grapple point.
Okay.
Holding the S key is actually optimal because it keeps your character in a perfect position to flick to the grapple point after every grapple melee, and it also backs your character away from the boss to prevent them from body blocking your grapple. The first encounter of Warlord's Ruin is definitely the best place to practice this technique because Wrathel will stagger after every single grapple melee, which makes him super easy to bully. So I definitely recommend practicing grapple there. Here's a clip of grapple melee DPS against Wrathel using the W key. And here's a clip of grapple melee DPS against Wrathel using the S key. As you can see, grappling while holding S results in about 30% more damage than holding W, which is an insane difference for just switching movement inputs, actually. This is definitely required to kill Crota this season with the much stricter damage check. Now that we know how to properly execute grapple melees, let's actually talk about Crota. First I will cover what each player needs to do in an optimal damage phase, and then I will cover everything that can go wrong and how to react to it. Spoiler alert, there's a lot, so prepare yourself. Starting with Navigator player, pick up the tangle that you made during DPS setup just a couple seconds ago. Throw the tangle at Crota and grapple to the oversoul side of Crota. This is important, you do not want to be on the same side as your teammate, so grappling to the oversoul side will put you on the opposite side of your teammate, so Crota is between you and your teammate. Make sure the tangle hits Crota. This will give you and your teammate Woven Mail for 10 seconds, which is extremely important for survivability. So do not miss. This is basically a death sentence and will likely cause a rerun if you miss the tangle on Crota. When you reach Crota, do one frenzied blade with 1-2 punch before planting your feet on the ground to start grapple meleeing. Your job is to hit as many grapple melees as possible over the course of this phase because you don't have to sever or tractor, so you are just spamming grapple melees. At about 8 seconds left on Oversoul timer, you should leave to switch Chalice. You can ego the timer down to around 6 seconds if you feel comfortable doing so because you do have eager edge to get to the swap location quickly. When you're at the swap location, you should already be aiming your fusion rifle at the Oversoul so you can shoot it immediately when your teammate takes Chalice from you. Don't worry about any ads, it is your teammate's job to keep you alive. Okay, Tractor player. Your job is to make sure Tractor and Sever have 100% uptime while also hitting as many grapples as you can during the phase. Tractor instantly upon breaking Crota's shield, and make sure you are on the spawn side of Crota. Hit 4 grapple melees. One of these will stagger Crota for an extra second after he stands up out of his final stand animation, so don't worry about severing immediately upon seeing him stand up because he will stagger again to one of the grapple melees. If your grapples are slightly slow, you might want to just do 3 grapple melees before severing, but ideally you should get 4 off. After the 4th grapple melee, do 1 frenzied blade with 1-2 punch to apply sever, and then retractor. Hit 6 more grapple melees before retractoring again, and then after tractoring again, you'll hit at least 2 more, ideally 3, and the most I've ever hit is 5 more grapple melees before having to leave to switch Chalice. You should leave when Oversoul timer has 8 seconds remaining. You can try to ego this if you want, but it's not a good idea because you don't have eager edge to get to the swap quickly. While you're running to the swap, ricochet a blinding GL off the floor or a wall to blind, but importantly, do not blow up any cursed thrall that could harm your teammate. Pop super and grab chalice from your teammate at the same time. This will give them woven mail just to ensure that they don't die, and then go put the chalice away. If you don't have super for the swap because you had to use it during damage because you were either 1 HP or missed your grapple, then it's okay. Your teammate will probably be fine if you blinded all the enemies around them correctly. But this is already not optimal because super DPS is significantly lower than grapple melee DPS, and you should not ever be in fear of dying if you do the damage rotation properly. Now let's talk about everything that can go wrong during damage phase, and there is quite a bit of it. The first thing is you come out of damage phase with not enough damage to clear, and this simply means that you did not grapple fast enough. You got to be able to grapple at max speed pretty much the entire time to have enough damage to kill Crota, so go into Wrathel, bully him a bit, and get really good at grappling quickly. When you are comfortable grappling quickly, then come back and do some more on Crota. Also, just practicing on Crota once you feel comfortable enough is a good idea. I would only recommend Wrathel if you are not comfortable holding the S key, but once you're comfortable holding S, then you should only be practicing on Crota. With max speed grapples for the whole phase, Crota actually still has a little bit of forgiveness, although not a lot, so just make sure you're grappling as quickly as you possibly can. The next thing that can go wrong is you miss your grapple, and this will most commonly happen due to nerves. Missing a grapple, especially this season, will 99% of the time cause you to wipe to not having enough damage to push to final stand. If you miss your grapple in second or third phase, and you still feel that it's possible, there are a few ways to get your grapple back. Tractor cannon, to get your grapple back if you miss, you will place a barricade to proc bomber, and then use the rest of your frenzied blades and pop super, and hopefully you will have your grapple back by the time your super ends. Otherwise, leave to switch chalice if it is time to leave. Navigator, do the same thing, pop a barricade to proc bomber, then shoot scatter signal at Crota because fusion rifles proc threat of generation very quickly and you will get your grapple back in about 3 to 4 shots. You can also run attrition orbs on scatter signal just to spawn an orb of power to proc threat of warding for the extra survivability. It's only 5 seconds of woven mail because it got nerfed this season, but it is much better than nothing. And then when you get your grapple back, go right back to grappling, and hopefully you will still be able to hit the damage check. If both of you miss, then just wipe. There's no point in trying to run it at that point. The next thing that can go wrong is you wipe to the oversoul timer. This happens a lot if you ego damage too hard, especially if your damage doesn't look good enough and you want to hit more grapples to hit what looks like clearable damage. This is not ever worth doing unless your damage is really bad, because wiping to oversoul timer is really painful, especially in second phase. The easiest way to not wipe to oversoul timer is to just hit more grapples and leave earlier for oversoul. You can leave with up to 10 seconds remaining if you really want to, but then you're obviously giving up 2 more grapple melees worth of damage. I would recommend leaving around 8 seconds remaining. Going down to 6 is kind of hard, but you can do it if you have to. Although if you are wiping constantly to oversoul timer when leaving at 6 seconds remaining, you should just start leaving earlier at 8 seconds. 8 seconds is almost impossible to wipe to oversoul timer unless some other BS happens that I will talk about later. The next thing that can happen, which will also cause you to wipe to oversoul timer, is while you are jumping off the bridge to Crota, you get caught on the ledge of the bridge, or I don't really know what to call that, like the railing on the side of the bridge, and you're not able to drop down to swap. This really only ends up being an issue for Tractor player because you don't have Eager equipped, so you need to save a Frenzied Blade to get over the ledge, or just leave earlier for Chalice swap. Navigator player, you have eager, so this isn't really a problem for you. The bigger issue for you is eager tracking onto Crota when you're trying to swing towards the chalice swap. Just make sure you jump far enough away and are looking away from Crota to have the lowest chance for eager to track to him, because getting eager tracking on Crota is very annoying and can cause a wipe to Oversoul if you don't leave early enough. The next annoying thing that can happen is Crota starts his first slam animation during your first sever, which will cause him to slide across the bridge. This is really annoying, and it's a similar desync to when you hit an enemy with an adaptive sword heavy attack on high frames and they just go flying. Crota will desync back to his original location after doing this, so just be prepared and know that it's about to happen so that you can get ready to move back to where he was and keep grapple meleeing. The next issue, and this is a really big one and really important, and it will happen during your DPS phases, is Crota will aggro on one person for the entire phase and hit all of his heavy attacks on them, which will either get them super low, or it will just outright kill them, or he will move out of Syntho range. Most of the time this will be up towards the Oversoul, and rarely he will move towards spawn, although that's really not common at all. Juggling Crota aggro while still hitting the damage check is probably the hardest part of this duo. You cannot allow Crota to attack one person with only banner times 1 for more than 2 attacks, because he will just kill them or get them so low that they have to leave for a long time and you will just wipe to damage check. This means that Crota's attacks must be juggled every 1 to 2 attacks between players so that each player has time to regen their health before getting hit by another attack. At the very start of the damage phase, you will have Woven Mail, so this isn't a big deal and you can tank more than 2 attacks while you have Woven Mail banner and he's severed. The main issue with getting hit more than twice in a row is he will start to move very far in the direction that he's attacking, and that's bad. We want him to stay in the middle of the bridge to keep Synthos active at all times. So even if you're not going to die because you have Woven Mail at the beginning of the phase, you should still juggle him if he hits you twice, because we don't want him to move out of Syntho range. There are a few options for juggling Crota, and I'll show some of those on the screen. First, you have to recognize when you need to juggle Crota, and this is whenever he does 2 attacks on one player or starts to move too far towards the middle of the bridge. To juggle Crota, the player who currently has Crota's aggro needs to get away from him quickly so that the other player is closer to Crota and he will retarget his aggro onto that player. The easiest way to do this is to 180 and just sprint away for a second before turning around and grapple meleeing back towards him, and by this point he should have retargeted onto the other player. Even if it's just for 1 attack, this is enough time for you to regain your health and be able to tank another attack. The second way to do this is to 180 and then slide away from Crota. Your slide is very quick, so this will almost always retarget aggro. However, there's a very tiny amount of RNG here. If you get a dead slide, this is just a massive ratio, so be prepared to turn around and slide again if you dead slide, just to make sure you get away from him, because dead sliding likely will keep his aggro on you. The last way, which is not super consistent, but you can do it because it's the easiest and requires the least amount of brain power, is to just hold the S key and just walk backwards. The problem with this is your walk speed is very slow compared to your sprint or slide, so he might just keep slamming on you, which will move him closer to you, and if you do not walk back fast enough, then he will just keep hitting you. So I wouldn't recommend this, but I'm throwing it out as an option. Another thing that can happen that also has to deal with Crota targeting is Crota refusing to swap aggro and moving too far towards the center of the bridge or towards spawn. If this happens, you first need to recognize that he is moving too far away from the middle of the bridge. The player that Crota is targeting should move to the same side as the untargeted player. Let Crota get 1 attack off so that he starts to move back towards the middle of the bridge, and then you should move back to the side that you were initially on. It is very important that you do not let him get more than 1 attack off while both players are on the same side, because this will leave both players at very low health and neither of you will be able to hold his aggro for long. allowing him to get off 2 attacks while both of you are on the same side generally results in death or a wipe to damage check because you're both super low and just cannot go in for grapple melees. The next thing that can go wrong, this list is getting very long, is that your grapple melee can no-reg and go straight through Crota. This is annoying and it sucks because you're just losing damage and then you also end up on the same side as your teammate. If this happens, usually what Titansgate and I will do is call switch sides if we see our grapple melee phase through Crota. Normally it's mine because my frames are higher. And then the person whose grapple didn't phase through will run to the other side so you are still on opposite sides of Crota during damage. If you want to go back to your original side, you can call switch sides again. This can be a little jarring because you now have to flick in the opposite direction to what you were used to doing to hit the grapple point. So it's okay to slow down your grapples for a second and make sure you know where the grapple point is. You can also just switch sides back to your original side, but make sure your teammate knows that you're doing that so that they also switch back to their original side. Then just go back to grapple meleeing. Another issue that can happen when your grapple melee phases through Crota is you can go off the side of the bridge. This is annoying but recoverable. If you get knocked off to the inside of the bridge, find the grapple point and grapple back up as quickly as possible, and then hit a Frenzied Blade 1-2 punch on your way back up just to lock you in place on Crota, and then go right back to grapple meleeing. If you get knocked off to the outside of the bridge, jump back up and once again hit a 1-2 punch Frenzied Blade to move yourself back to the center of the bridge while also getting some damage in, and then go back to grapple meleeing. The player who is not knocked off should keep Crota centered in the bridge, so switch sides if you have to, but ideally you won't have to, and your teammate just gets back up in time and can take aggro from Crota so that you're not getting rolled by multiple attacks. Also importantly, make sure you jump or grapple back up to the opposite side of where your teammate is just so you don't end up on the same side as them. Okay, the final two things, and these are both just pretty BS. Crota attacks onto the railing on the side of the bridge, which will cause him to animation cancel his attack and immediately attack again. If this happens, it's just a massive ratio, and there's really not much you can do about it. Hopefully, if you're doing the rotation correctly, he is severed and you have banner, so you should be able to survive, but whoever he double hits needs to get away from him as quickly as possible to juggle the aggro to the other player. If he's not severed and he does this animation cancel attack, the player that he's targeted will just instantly die and it is a rerun. The final thing that can happen, and this is similar to what can happen to Sword Holder while doing First Sword, Crota can physics you into a wall and just launch you off the map or a million miles away and get you to 1 HP. If this happens during DPS, you should just restart the run because you're either knocked so far away that you can't get back in time and you will wipe to a damage check, or if he launches you off the map, it's just a wipe anyway. So if he physics as a player, it's best to just rerun. The easiest way to avoid this is to keep Crota always in the middle of the bridge. If he's towards one edge of the bridge, he's far more likely to slam you into the railing and launch you. So keep him as centered as possible with your juggling, which also means that you should be standing as centered in the bridge as possible. If you do get launched, there are two ways to sort of recover from it. The first is only for Navigator player. If you get launched, you can pull out your Eager Sword and swing back to Crota and keep grappling, provided you're not low health. Or you can use a Frenzied Blade to cancel your momentum and swing back towards Crota. That is the only option for Tractor player, because obviously you don't have Eager. So if you get launched, just do a Frenzied Blade as quickly as possible and try to get back to damage. If you do hit a wall and you're 1 HP, then still try to get back quickly, but just make sure you're out of his range and you don't get hit so you can regen a little bit of health before going back in for damage. Okay, that's a lot, and that's pretty much all the BS that can happen in damage phase. I don't think I missed anything. If I did, I'll edit it in right here. But let's move on to Final Stand. Okay, I actually missed two things because of course I did. The first of which is a thrall can run up on the bridge during DPS. This will happen randomly and is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it grants increased survivability, because killing the Thrall will either extend or proc a new Banner of War, which gives more healing. But this can be a bad thing if the person without Banner gets the kill on the Thrall and procs a new Banner. Proccing a new banner will actually decrease that player's damage output because at the start of the final shape, Synthos were given diminishing returns when paired with Banner of War. So Banner of War is only supposed to grant a 15% increase to melee damage with Syntheseps. However, this only applies to the person who actually has Banner. The person who is getting Banner from the other player will still get the 40% damage increase from the Banner of War even when paired with Syntheseps. This is why proccing a new banner is actually bad, because both of you will only be getting the 15% damage increase from Synthos, as opposed to one of you having 15% and one of you having 40%. During first and second damage phase, I would say that this is overall a good thing if a Thrall runs up the bridge, just for the added survivability. But if this happens late in third phase, this is actually a really bad thing, and I'll talk about that when I talk about final stand issues. Okay, the second thing I missed isn't really a BS thing, it's more of a difference between first, second, and then third damage phase. Third damage phase, you do not leave for Oversoul because you have the final stand animation to swap the Chalice, so your timer is actually based on the Chalice timer and not the Oversoul timer. If you wipe to Oversoul in third phase, then you did not deal enough damage to hit final. In an actual run, you will never wipe to Oversoul in third phase, you will always push before the Oversoul explodes. In a few cases, your damage might be insane, in which case you would have to delay starting damage slightly so that Chalice is actually ready when you want to push Crota to final stand so that you can swap immediately. You never want to push Crota to final stand and have to wait to swap Chalice. This is just a death sentence. You need that time for final stand setup. Speaking of final stand, now let's actually move on to final stand. No way! No way! Final stand setup is very difficult at first because there are a lot of things that have to happen in a very short amount of time, but once you get the setup down, the damage is actually pretty easy. Let's start with Tractor Player. Your setup in Final is pretty much the same as Navigator's setup during a normal damage phase, minus putting up the grapple point. After pushing Crota to Final, move to the Chalice swap location as quickly as possible and take the Chalice from your teammate. Blind the Thrall in mid as you drop down to swap Chalice if the swap is in bottom, or blind the Thrall after switching the Chalice if you have a swap up top. Kill one Thrall with a Frenzied Blade to spawn a Tangle and proc Banner. Shoot two more Thrall with your shotgun to extend Banner to its max duration. Pick up the Tangle, throw it at Crota, and grapple to whichever side your teammate is not on. This will most likely be the Oversoul side of Crota. Hit a Frenzied Blade with 1-2 punch, Tractor, and then do your normal damage rotation. Don't worry about dying to Chalice, you will either clear or wipe to Oversoul every time before Chalice kills you. Okay, now Navigator player. After pushing Crota to final, move to the swap location as quickly as possible. While your teammate is taking Chalice from you, shoot a new grapple point into the air using the lineup on screen, and switch to your fusion rifle for Oversoul. Wait for Crota's knockback pulse to go off, this happens at the end of his final stand animation, and then use the grapple point to grapple back up to him. At this point, your teammate should be on their way back up with a Tangle. Now just spam grapple melees until about 3 seconds left on the Oversoul timer. Back up and get ready to break the Oversoul. Break the Oversoul. And just keep spamming grapples until he dies. You can try to hit the Oversoul plus Expunge bug for a little bit of extra damage, but it's not mandatory if you hit your grapples correctly, and I don't think it's worth losing a final stand run to getting flinched off of Oversoul and letting it explode, because that is heartbreaking. Now let's talk about the issues that can arise in Final Stand. I'm going to skip all the DPS issues because they're the same, so just assume that most of the BS that happens during a damage phase can also happen during Final Stand. There are only two Final Stand exclusive issues, the first of which is Crota running away at the beginning of Final, either up to the Oversoul or into spawn. Crota targets the closest player to him when he comes out of his final stand animation and will try to get as close to them as possible so he can attack them, I guess. You want to be as fast as possible with your final stand setup so he barely has any time to move before you're back on top of him. Tractor player, the thrall you choose to kill is also very important. You want to pick the closest thrall to the middle of the bridge that you are DPSing on. This will ensure that if you're the closest player to Crota, then he won't have to move very far at all to reach you, and he should stay in the middle of the bridge. Killing Thrall closer to spawn will cause Crota to run towards spawn if he locks onto you coming out of his final stand animation, and vice versa for Thrall close to Oversoul. It's also very important that when you grapple back up to damage in Final Stand, that you pay attention to where Crota is as you grapple up. If he's too far off center to one side, usually this will be towards Oversoul, then you want to grapple up to the same side as your teammate just to ensure that he slams back towards the middle of the bridge. Once he's back in a good spot, you can flip back to opposite sides so that you can juggle Crota. The second issue that can arise here is a thrall running up the bridge during third damage phase. Normally this would be a blessing because it would either extend your banner timer or proc a new banner, which just results in more damage and more healing. But if this happens in third phase, it's actually a curse if the tractor player is the person who got the kill on the thrall. If tractor gets the kill on the thrall, it will give them a tangle cooldown, which can entirely screw up their final stand setup because they no longer have a tangle to throw up at Crota to give Woven Mail and to grapple to. If this happens, it will likely end up being a wipe if you don't notice it. If you do notice it, and the tangle doesn't despawn by the time you grapple back up, then drop down to reproc banner, but don't bother getting a tangle because you have cooldown. Then use the grapple point to get back up to final stand and pick up the tangle that was spawned up there on the thrall that ran up and throw it at the floor to give you and your teammate Woven Mail. If the tangle despawns, then it's pretty much just a wipe. You will die because Crota does a lot of damage. If you've done everything correctly, then congratulations! You have cleared currently the hardest duo that has been cleared in this game. Despite all the issues that can arise in this encounter, there's actually very little RNG. This duo is almost entirely skill dependent on whether you can output enough damage to kill Crota and react correctly to every little minor thing that can go wrong. It actually becomes really fun with enough practice, and because of that, it has become by far my favorite duo in the game. And that's it for Duo Master Crota. I don't know how long this video ended up being. As of recording this, it's about 52 minutes long, which is a lot, so I don't know what it ended up at. Hopefully it's not much longer than that. I want to say big thank you to my duo Titanskate for sending me a lot of his footage to use for this, since I only had my POV, which is Tractor Cannon. All of the Navigator player POV that you see in this video is from him, so I'll link him down in the description. I do pretty much all my lowmans with him, and he's super cool. Other than that, thanks for watching. I hope this is helpful to anyone running Duo Master Crota. This was definitely a success for me because I learned a lot about editing videos while recording this, so hopefully this leads to some successes with some Crota clears.